this next one is sort of a statement and sort of a question wrapped in there. It's somebody coming from law enforcement, and I thought it was a pretty informative statement based on one of the other podcasts that we did. And it says this: I currently work vice, but I've had my share of use of force on the job. I quickly learned that you can't knock everyone out, and that applying jiu-jitsu will reduce injuries to you and the suspect. So this is what we talked about last time. Mm-hmm. Whereas if my method of controlling you is to strike you, I'm going to have to beat you over and over again to get you to submit. Whereas if I know how to do a chokehold, boom, you're good. Back to the quote. The chokehold, or carotid as we called it, is still permitted in our force policy, but only in an immediate defense of life situation. Basically, using a chokehold is considered deadly force and equivalent with shooting someone. There was a time when the LAPD saying was, when in doubt, choke him out. In the 80s, during the PCP era, officers were applying the carotid choke on PCP suspects daily. During one of those incidents, a male black died from the choke being improperly applied. Chief Gates made the mistake of going on national television and saying that male blacks had a higher chance of dying from the choke due to their physical make and larger Adam's apple. As you can imagine, this caused an outrage, which in turn caused the department to fall to political pressure and make the carotid choke almost impossible to use. So when I kind of alluded to this on that last podcast, that there's exactly what happened. A guy got choked to death. There was political pressure. Chief Gates comes out and says that. And actually, I went online and researched this a little bit. He made like every classic mistake you could make on this, and that's why they outlawed using chokeholds. And actually, as I read through it, a bunch of them, kind of how I referred to the Rodney King beating, and said here you had guys just wailing on this individual with bats and sticks and billy clubs or whatever. And it didn't stop him. And they referred to that when they looked at the chokehold being used, that's one of the major cases that they say, man, let people use the chokehold so this doesn't happen. This guy goes on, as a certified ARCON, which is ARCON stands for Arrest and Control, ARCON instructor, I feel the department taking away our ability to use a rear naked choke has caused many unnecessary shootings and injuries to suspects. It saddens me to work for a department that is being run like a poor corporation instead of a police department. So that's kind of the buildup, right? And that's why I wanted to read it, because there was just good information in there, and it is very much in line with what we talked about last time in police work and also in combat situations where you're dealing with non-combative people in a hostile environment. In other words, you go into a building to capture a terrorist, and there's women in there, or there's kids in there, or there's teenagers in there that are not combative, but they're not compliant either. So They don't have a gun. You're not going to shoot them, but you got to get control of them. Now it gets into sort of the leadership question here. How do I keep morale up and stay motivated when I have no faith in the leaders, and when the leadership has turned its back on you time after time? The morale is at its lowest point, even lower than post-92 riots, according to the old-timers. We were trained in the academy to be warriors. Now the department doesn't allow us to call ourselves warriors, only guardians. This change in mentality will sadly cause only more bad shootings and more officers getting hurt. So that's, obviously a tough situation. And like I said, for the jiu-jitsu versus striking, I think this is spot on. The jiu-jitsu and the grappling is a far superior way, like I said, of controlling people than striking is. That's just a reality. Now, on the leadership front, that leadership question, for me, I have my own team, right? I got my people. The people that are around me, I'm going to buffer all this bad morale and all this stuff. I'm going to buffer it away from my team. I'm going to make their lives good. That's my goal. And I'm going to lead toward what my ideal is. Right? I'm going to lead toward what my ideal is. Now, in order to do that well, you got to play the game so that you can get more influence. If you don't go play the game, you say, hey, the bosses don't know what they're talking about. Bosses don't know what they're talking about. And we need to you got to play the game so that you can get more influence. And that means doing what you have to do. That means not saying, hey, our morale sucks and we don't have good leadership. No, it means going, okay, we're going to move. We're going to move forward. Here's the goal. Here's what I think. Here's what I believe. Hey, by the way, I'm going to run this up the chain of command. I'm going to gather the data myself. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to do the administrative work. I'm going to study the cases. I'm going to present them and say, hey, here's what's happening. And I'm going to do that from an unemotional situation, just from pure logic. Hey, we've had this many shootings. We've had this many incidents. We've had this many suspects turn up with concussions. There's only one thing that causes a concussion to a suspect. It's getting hit in the head. So if we're having, 42% concussion rate, maybe we could drop that down if we use something that doesn't cause concussions but still gives us control. You got to do that legwork and make life good for the people that work for you. And that can be a little bit hard to do, but it's not that hard. Your subordinates look at you as the guy. And so the way you carry yourself and the way you present yourself and the morale that you have is the morale that they're going to have. That's what they're going to see as the way it is. And I've always viewed in a SEAL team that the SEAL teams have different vibes in them, good and bad. Some will have good commands, and there's a new commanding officer every 2 years at a SEAL team. So you get a new guy that comes in, and he might be a lot different than the last guy. He might be really good. He might be really bad. And you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me in the SEAL platoon as a platoon commander or even as a squad commander or even as an E5 in a SEAL platoon, meaning just one of the sled dogs. I don't care what the upper chain of command, because guess what? We're going to do things right. We're going to make things happen. Now, we're not going to disobey what's being told, but if we're being told something that's wrong, guess what? We're going to try and get it. We're going to run up the chain of command. We're going to be squared away. We're going to play the game so that we can make the changes that need to be made because I care about the teams. Just like this guy cares about the police department, wants it to be a great force, wants it to do the right thing. And so you got to take that attitude that you control your part of the world. And the more you improve your part of the world and the more influence you gain, the more you'll have control over the big picture as well. There's no company, no corporation that maintains just superb morale all the time. It doesn't happen. Every company, every business, every unit, every force, every team has ups and downs. And they have leadership that comes in and takes over and that everyone considers to be bad. And that's the way it is. But you got to own your little piece of the world. And then, as you own your piece of the world, guess what? Everyone starts performing well. And as you perform well, you gain more clout. And as you gain more clout, you can influence real change. And that's what you're looking to do. So don't let that leadership, that bad, what you consider to be bad leadership, just don't let that permeate into your head, into your world. Buffer your people from it. And then do what you can to build the best team you can get so that you can have more influence, so that you can change that policies and the procedures that you don't agree with. It's a long haul. I know it.
Yeah.
I don't have a miracle solution for you, man. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
But that's the world.
Yeah.
That's the world.
Yeah, especially when you're dealing with the political elements of it, and then at the same time you have the public eye on you, So as far as exposure and stuff like that, it's the newsman and just, I think, media in general. It's easy to spread all this negative stuff. It's easy, you know? So it's like one of those jobs where it in a big way, it only gets attention when something wrong is going on, you know?
Yeah, and I would take advantage of a lot of this negative press because a lot of this negative press, like this guy's saying, hey, we're getting more shootings, we're getting more beatings. Well, why is that? Let's look at our procedures.
Yeah.
Hey, boss, you know what? We used to use this chokehold, and we had X amount of concussions. We had X amount of shootings. You could present the information in a logical way that proves what I know to be true, what this guy knows to be true, what anybody that's ever done this type of work before knows to be true, right? That is that there are certain techniques that work better than others. And a chokehold and a grappling type scenario definitely works better to subdue somebody than striking them in the head repeatedly until they're knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of it, and no one can argue with that. And the only reason that they went against it is for political pressure. So how do we defeat that? We gain clout, we move, we continue to get influence, we grow our power, we strengthen our allies, we build a coalition, and we go forward and we win. Yeah. And it might take 3 years, it might take 3 months, it might take 6 years. This guy right here that wrote this might need to be the chief of police himself before he gets it done.
Yeah.
But that's what he does.
Yeah.
He keeps on the right path and keeps moving in the right direction and does the right thing so that he can get advanced. He doesn't make a bunch of emotional arguments against people that have a bunch of power and put himself in a bad seat for them where they're looking at him like he's a rabble rouser. No, not a good thing.
Yeah.
You got to build the relationships up the chain of command so that you become respected so that people do listen to you.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. That's how you make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And on a side note, the chokehold, well, jiu-jitsu overall isn't just submission hold. That's kind of, in my opinion, one of the great things about jiu-jitsu. It's like, I know it kind of seems that way sometimes if you don't do jiu-jitsu or whatever, you think, oh, this guy knows jiu-jitsu. Oh, he'll choke you out. He'll break your arm, you know? The kind of the glamorous part of it is the submission for sure, but every other part of it is controlling the situation all the way down to controlling the other guys. So when you consider like just a concept of wrist control in jiu-jitsu, when you're rolling someone, wrist control, just that alone will help you in law enforcement. Just that alone.
No doubt.
You don't have to, let alone the whole of jiu-jitsu, just wrist control. That'll help you alone. So you don't need to necessarily, and I'm not saying so the chokehold should remain banned. I'm not saying that. I mean, for someone to die, I mean, I know this guy died because the chokehold was applied incorrectly. So I don't know if he broke his neck or his Adam's apple or something like this.
And by the way, if he was better at jiu-jitsu,
right,
he would have applied it, put the guy to sleep, and then cuffed him, and it all been good to go.
Which happens all the time in class, by the way. In training, guys get put to sleep all the time. I got put to sleep, I don't even know how many times. A bunch of times. For someone to die from a regular, normal chokehold, you got to choke him for a long time. Yeah. Where your arm's going to be so tired just from choking him. After he goes unconscious, you have to keep choking him for a long time. So it takes a lot.
Yeah.
This
is probably what you said, probably a crushed hyoid bone, I think it's called. And it's basically your Adam's apple crushes, shuts your windpipe, and the guy didn't get a tracheotomy in time. Yeah. That is very, very rare, if ever, in jiu-jitsu. Now I've seen it happen one time. A guy passed out and went to sleep, and someone was gi choking him, and so just kept cranking. Didn't realize that he was out for a couple seconds, and it hurt him. So you do have to watch out for it. But I mean, that is so rare compared to the amount of times that someone gets hit in the head and gets brain damage. I mean, that just happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, fully. And there's jokes that you can actually do that does that kind of stuff. But again, if you know jiu-jitsu, you know the positions, you know the moves, you know the submissions. If you can do submission hold.
And you're not panicking. Yeah. You feel very comfortable on the ground. You feel very comfortable engaging in combat. You feel very comfortable engaging in this struggle. Yep. You're used to it. You do it all the time, so you're not freaking out. Yeah. You're not adrenaline just cranking a guy in the head with a billy club over and over again. And what does he do? He puts his hands up. Why? Because he's trying to fight me. No, he's just trying to protect his head, but you think he's trying to fight you? And that's why you're hitting him even harder. Yeah. So, it's definitely a tough situation, and the way you win, on the ground is with jiu-jitsu, and the way you win this leadership situation is also with jiu-jitsu. You don't go and bang heads with the chain of command.
Yeah.
That's not how you're going to win this fight. The way you win this fight is by doing jiu-jitsu against the leadership. Yeah. And you get in with them, and you gain their trust, and you make them think that you're the man. And your team is awesome. And, oh, by the way, I know our team's awesome, and we totally agree with this policy, and we've supported only this policy is working great, and this other policy, oh, you know what, you got this one policy here that's not so good. Maybe we could do something to fix that. Let me do some research. That's how you win. You got to play the long game.
It's so funny that analogy, like, do jiu-jitsu, right? So, because really what jiu-jitsu is establishing a good position, right? Establishing a good position, knowing where to be and where not to be. You know, where to put your weight or where to put your force and where not to put your force, you know?
Yeah, so and the other big piece is that in jiu-jitsu that I was more referring to, although those are all correct and you have to do those, but it's also, you think I'm going to choke you, but I'm actually going to arm lock you.
Right.
Like that's the setup, that you flank people and you attack them indirectly.
Right.
You infiltrate and you do things indirectly instead of going and just fisticuffs, banging each other, war of attrition. Yeah. Don't do that.
So true, man. Yeah, leading up the chain of command, I think that's kind of a new concept. Not new,
it
like
is. We get, that's a chapter in the book.
Yeah.
Or it's actually a sub-chapter in the book, but it's one that people always have a hard time getting their head around because I always said, like, my boss did whatever I want him to do.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. That's the way it is. When you build trust, you take the time and you build the relationship and you prove over and over again that you're going to do the right thing in the right situation and that you're going to take accountability and responsibility when something goes wrong and that you have a good head on your shoulders and that you're not going to get emotional about things and you do all those things and that you're driving and supporting the mission, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get supported, which means your boss is going to do what you want him to do.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're doing the same thing with down the chain of command.
You're
it's
doing
like
the
just
same
that
thing
exact list. You're doing that same thing. It's crazy, and because you just, I don't know. It doesn't seem as intuitive, you know.
Because like it's the easiest excuse that anyone could ever have is, hey, you know what? My boss didn't give me what I needed. That's why I failed.
Yep.
Hey, you know what? Our bosses won't let us use chokeholds.
Right.
And therefore we can't accomplish our mission well. No, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna lead up the chain of command and I'm gonna get my superiors to let us do what we need to do to do it effectively. Because guess what? The leadership is aligned. Your leadership is going to be aligned with what you want to do. Do you think that the leadership of the LAPD wants, suspects and perps to get brain damage or killed? No, they don't want that. They want them to be arrested properly. They don't want to have lawsuits, the whole 9 yards. Yep. So if you're presenting something to them that's going to improve them and move them towards the mission and support the ideals of what they're trying to get accomplished, of course you're going to get supported. Now you're going to get these little political battles, but those are just part of the challenge. Yeah, they're just part of making it happen.
Yeah.
That's part of the jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Yeah, when you roll with a guy, don't expect him not to fight back a little bit.
Yeah, they're going to fight back. Exactly right.